bonafide beats. Heavy hit splits, wild file style, freak flows fast, close chord dial, make links slate at the 8 pass, make more papes, too tired crash, self-serve cake all night nag.
Welcome back to the Deepwater Podcast, and today we're going to take a look at the running backs that are on Miami's roster. But first things first, I want to take care of a little house cleaning. I want to thank everybody for the support, for everyone who subscribed, and particularly for everyone who leaves comments down in the comment section. We try to respond to those as quickly as we can, as soon as we get them, and it's mostly been positive, and that's what gives us the drive to continue to do what we're doing. And the first thing we want to do today, though, is we want to go back and make sure that for everyone who's new, that you understand the buckets that we're classifying players in as we go along. So let's go ahead and run back through that list again, beginning first with studs. And studs, of course, these are players who are annually competing for Pro Bowls, and some of them may eventually get a gold jacket if they keep playing like they're playing year in and year out. The second category is starters. And the league and success in the league is built on starters. These are guys who may or may not reach that stud status eventually. And they do it one or two times or maybe more during the season, but they just don't do it consistently enough to be classified as a stud. But they're not going to get you beat on Sundays either. So you're comfortable with these guys in the starting lineup week in and week out. And that moves us to our third category. And these are incumbents. A lot of times, to give you an example of how we view an incumbent, it's a draft pick that's in his third season that for one reason or another, whether it's injuries, coaching changes, or just something doesn't click, they haven't performed yet. And most likely you're bringing in competition to push these guys to avoid them going into our last category, which are duds. And we don't even bother covering duds because most likely they're going to be replaced, and the team is actively trying to replace them. Now, that's not a sign of disrespect because in reality, if you're on an NFL practice squad, if you get an NFL tryout, you're an elite athlete that the rest of us can only dream about being, okay? So as we go through this thing, those are the buckets that we like to put players into, okay? So before we get started here, there's one other item I'd like to discuss, and it's about running styles in football. You know, there's a lot of different schemes and strategies that teams apply to run the football, whether it's zone, whether it's power, whether it's counter. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to include a link down in the description box for you guys to go and check out some of the schemes that the NFL uses, because most fans are aware that you need an offensive line for your quarterback to be successful. But a lot of fans are less aware of how important that offensive line is for a running game. And I want to frame that context before we start digging into these running backs, because I'm going to get to a point that I'm going to bring up later, and I'm going to circle back to this argument. All right, let's get started. Studs. Miami doesn't have any studs. So let's not even waste any time discussing this. And move along to the next bucket. The next bucket is starters. I don't see where Miami has any starters at running back. But what I am going to do is I'm going to put a pin in Chandler Cox, because technically he's classified as a running back, although he's a fullback. And I'm going to tell you what I think about Chandler Cox later on in this episode. So Miami doesn't have any starters, which leaves us with incumbents. And this is where Miami has two incumbents. The first incumbent is Patrick Laird, a gentleman that they affectionately call the intern. And the thing about Patrick Laird is, I think Patrick Laird is a football player. He's not going to be great at anything. And I don't think he'll elevate himself to starter status. But what he is he's that guy that you can insert in 5 to 10 plays a game to do critical things that most fans don't even notice, like picking up a first down on 3rd and 5 by breaking a tackle. And I like this guy because he just brings the energy to the game. Okay? And that moves us on to the next incumbent, who I am going to focus on because it's Kalen Ballage. And with Kalen Ballage, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give him that same wild card that I gave Josh Rosen. But I'm a little more confident in this particular wild card, and I'm going to tell you why. Remember back in the very beginning of this episode when I was discussing the different types of running styles. If you're going to run power, you need a certain type of offensive lineman. If you're going to run zone, you need a certain type of offensive lineman. And it was clear that Miami was mixing, matching, and experimenting with their offensive line last season. And if you missed that episode, the men up front, where we covered the offensive linemen, here's the link, and I want you to go back and watch that episode. Going back to Kalen Ballage, from a talent standpoint, has everything you could possibly want at a running back. He's a little over 6'1". He's 230 pounds, and he runs a 4.45 40. So he's not a slasher. And the argument about how bad Kalen Ballage was this past season, to me, it doesn't make any sense. Because if you could point to a running back on the roster that delivered this season, I would understand the argument. But the fact is that the entire running game was terrible. And watching the tape on Kalen Ballage this season was brutal. And I'm going to tell you what I chose to do. Because Kalen Ballage only had 74 carries this season. That's it. He got 20 of those carries against Indianapolis. And what I chose to do was I'm going to go ahead and focus on that Indianapolis game. And I'm going to show you some of the plays. But before I do that, I want you guys to go back and search for some of the comments that Brian Flores and the organization has made about Kalen Ballage when they were asked about the running game. And a lot of those comments circled around the fact that the running game is a team effort. Okay. And if you look at the comments, you would find that the organization really has confidence in Kalen Ballage. They have far more confidence in Kalen Ballage than the fan base does. So before I roll this tape, I want you to understand that context because it's not going to be very long. But what I want you to do is I want you to shut down the outside narrative and just tell me what your eyes see. Because this is not difficult. And what I'm going to do is I'm not showing you any of the television broadcast angles because you can't really see what's going on. You don't get any sense of depth and you don't get any sense of spacing to be able to see where a player can or can't go or what they can and can't do. So just trust your eyes and watch this game tape. And you should be able to determine a lot of things on your own because what I see is I see a lot of whiffed blocks. I see offensive linemen on the ground. I don't see an aggression out of the offensive line. And some of the worst things that I do see on this tape is coming from the tight end group. And when we move to that area, that's going to be pretty bad because in the blocking game, they are as bad as any unit on this team. And I think Miami's going to have to do some things there to upgrade the blocking from the tight end position in the running game. And the very last play, I want you to pay particular attention to Durham Smythe. And what I'm going to do is when this is over, I want you to look at a little bit of game film of that particular play with Durham Smythe because I need an explanation on what he's doing and what you expect from Kalen Ballage in that play. All right, so let's set this up. It's 2nd down and 10 on the 40-yard line, and you can see the Dolphins are in this 31 personnel group. They have 3 wide receivers and 1 tight end here, Durham Smythe, and he's matched up with Darius Leonard on this play. And what's going to happen is he's going to take a bad set, and Darius Leonard is just going to eat his lunch. And it's going to force Ballage to the outside. And there's nothing Kalen Ballage can do there. So let's slow this play down and see if we can pick up some cues on what happened here. You see, Ryan Fitzpatrick is going to alert. He's going to set his protection, and he's going to identify the Mike linebacker. There he is right there, number 50. And you see the communication between the tight end and the tackle here. And what's going to happen is that defensive end is going to slant to the inside, and Smythe is going to take too wide of a set and give that inside up to Darius Leonard, who's going to force Kalen Ballage to adjust the way that he's running the football. And it's going to put Kalen Ballage in an unwinnable situation. Leonard's already in the backfield. And you see this type of thing play in and play out regardless of who the Dolphins played this season. And it's not just the tight end group. This right here is a 5-yard gain that probably could have been a touchdown. And what's going to happen is I'm going to slow this down because I want to point out a couple of things to you guys on this play. And you can see the Dolphins are in this 2 tight end set. And I'm going to slow it down when Grant comes in motion. And I'm going to stop it right here because I want you to see Chandler Cox is looking at that outside backer. See that? And Dieter is already up on this backer. Dieter should take that backer and just drive him up out of the play. But what's going to happen is Dieter's going to actually come off and he's going to attempt to block the outside backer. And that's going to force Cox to redirect. Watch Cox's eyes and watch his feet. He's going to come off. He's got to change up and try to block that man. Ballage only has one option to go, and it ends up being a 5-yard gain. But that could have been a touchdown. And these are the types of things that you see in a football game on game tape that you can't see on a television broadcast. And it's truly a game of inches and a game of milliseconds. If they execute that right, then Kalen Ballage is on a safety. And I like the chances of Kalen Ballage taking out that safety and taking it on in for the touchdown. Now, remember Chandler Cox? And I said I was going to put a pin in him and come back to him later. This is where I'm going to come back to Chandler Cox. Because one of the things that I did notice in watching the tape is exactly what Brian Flores said when they drafted Chandler Cox. The NFL doesn't know how to really deal with fullbacks like that anymore. And you see on tape, players make business decisions when a fullback is in the game, okay? So let's look at this 1st and 10 right here. And I want you to watch Chandler Cox. He's right there on the horseshoe. I'm going to play it in full speed, and I want to see if you catch what happens here, okay? Remember what I just said about this being a game of inches and milliseconds? I'm going to slow it down because I want you to focus on this DB right here. And what's going to happen is he's going to get into this hole and he's going to take a little sidestep to the right because he don't really want that business with Chandler Cox. And that's going to give Kalen Ballage that small gap to squirt through and pick up 5 yards. And you see this a lot. And I personally think that the Dolphins actually just redshirted Chandler Cox this season for him to get bigger, faster, and stronger in the offseason. Okay, and before I move along, I want to address the inevitable because what happens is you have people who are going to put these videos out there in slow motion and they're going to have unrealistic expectations. And this is what I mean. I'm going to use this play with Kalen Ballage as an example. And you can see that Kalen Ballage didn't have a whole lot of options here. And what the Dolphins are doing is they're going to use Durham Smythe on this wham block where he's going to come across and try to block this defensive tackle. And I'm going to stop it in the hole so you can see what I mean about when people put these videos out. There's the wham block, and I'm going to stop right here. And you have people that are going to say, well, look at this running lane Kalen Ballage has. He should have planted his feet and headed into that running lane. Kalen Ballage is 230 pounds. And the moment he stops his feet, he's dead in the water for that linebacker that's coming into the hole. Okay? And we need to stop giving these people attention because they just have unrealistic expectations. The last running back who could make an offensive line less important and could make that cut that you're asking for, his name was Barry Sanders. And he retired a very, very long time ago. Okay? So that's going to wrap up this episode. And the Dolphins have no studs at running back. They don't have any starters at running back. They have 2 incumbents at running back. But one of those incumbents, I'm going to label as a wild card. And I'm very interested to see what a coach like Chan Gailey, who knows how to produce a running game, is going to do with Chandler Cox. And not just Kalen Ballage, but any running back that they bring in. And I like Kalen Ballage's potential behind a fullback like Chandler Cox in an offense like Chan Gailey's going to run, okay? The next episode, we're going to cover the tight ends, And I don't think that's going to take very long because at first glance, the only thing we have is a tight end who can't really block, but he's a mismatch in the passing game. And everybody else just seems to be a jag. So that's my assessment initially. And I'm going to go back and pour through some games this season and see what I can find to see if I feel any differently. Okay? So stay tuned for the next episode. Well, I appreciate you guys for listening, and thanks for the support.
You got keys to the underground. Shimty. Killer Hurt. This for you. About to get sick with it. Exclusive. People. As quick as I can spit it, I'm sick with it. Survivor, you and yours riders. Born pieces of shit, flip scripts just to get rich. In this rap world, I murder everything except track. Y'all whack. A matter of fact, you never seen dead bodies, the aftermath of what I just did with my army. Deep with heat, lurking the outskirts. Politic with government affiliates. Fireworks tied in the wind. Regardless, thugged out the hardest. Eliminate the fakes while I arbitrate flesh to flesh. I'm the most treacherous you ever met. Killer Canuck, Kinetic.